much. So with that, we bring in former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker and former Florida Attorney General and Special Advisor to President Trump, Pam Bondi. Thank you very much for being here, both of you. You know, I think so much of this sort of gets lost in the volume of all of these cases. But in the American judicial system, each case is separate. And we have to look at this one right now in terms of the validity of it. So you hear what Letitia James is saying there, Matt, and I'd like to start with you, the Attorney General. She's talking about power. She's talking about money. She's saying no one is above the law. In this case, they are basically saying that the Trumps inflated the value of their real estate properties, A, so that they could be higher up on the Forbes wealthy list, and B, they say that they misrepresented it to bankers and insurers, neither of which are declaring to be an injured party in this case. So what is this really about?
Yeah, this is about essentially kicking Donald Trump and his family out of New York. And they don't want their business. They want to take away their right to do business. They want them to have to liquidate all of their assets. You know, I just think about a yearly statement that is submitted to the bank or to insurance companies of illiquid assets, real estate assets, and an estimate of those values on a sheet of paper given to a bank, where a bank could do an appraisal, they could reject that, they could assign a value themselves. I just think this whole case just seems like a really vindictive attempt by the Attorney General in New York to kick Trump out of New York State.
Yeah, you know what? I think it does. And I think it shouldn't matter whether you approve of the former president or want to vote for him or don't want to vote for him or ever want to see him again as president. Pam, when you look at this case, how many real estate companies in New York City do you think have overvalued or overestimated the worth of them, and who gets injured? Who is hurt? Who's the victim in this case? I can't see that.
Well, and there's not one, Martha. I was a state AG, as you know, for 8 years. This is what I did. And you never go after someone, first of all, if no one else is complaining and there's not a victim, an alleged victim. Here, if you're going to look for a victim, if you're going to look to evaluate the cost, the price of assets, you're going to look to the experts. Who are the experts here? The banks who loaned Donald Trump the money. And they're not complaining about this at all. They actually got paid back. They got paid back, some of them early, and they all made money on it. So they're not complaining at all. You know, and as an Attorney General, Martha, you're not only the top legal officer, but you're the top law enforcement officer in the state of New York. Right. And she's sitting in the front row of that courtroom today when there's a missing 9-year-old little girl in upper state New York. And I will give Governor Hochul credit for this. She is out there at that scene. And that's where the Attorney General of the state of New York should be right now, instead of sitting in a courtroom where there is no victim, as you said, and no business is going to want to do business in New York with this precedent that she's setting. It's horrible.
You make a great point, Pam. And Matt, you know, the way the banks and the insurance companies do this, they have their own valuators. So they look at it. It's not like they're just taking someone's word for it. Like, oh, this property's worth $125 million. And they say, actually, no, it's not. These are the other comparables on that property. Yeah. I mean, that's how this works. It is a very strange thing to focus on. And the judge who laughed, I think we have a video of him sort of smirking and laughing. He allowed certain parts of areas. It's just smirking and laughing. Oh, is that, yeah, oh, he's on camera now. Okay. And then he says, you know, the rest of this will not be on camera. There was a short part that they did put on camera. Here's Letitia James back in 2018 saying we're definitely going to sue him if she becomes Attorney General. Watch this.
One name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the...
So that's that, right?
Yeah.
Matt, your thoughts on you know, the motivation here and whether or not this is what we expect from the judicial system?
This is just one of the prime examples, Martha, of the two-tier system of justice. You can't, as a law enforcement officer, as someone that is sworn to protect and defend the Constitution of both the state and the country, you can't direct the awesome police powers of the state against one individual. And at the same time, you know, the judge who granted summary judgment, so essentially said that President Trump and all these other defendants are guilty last week, you know, is essentially saying that Mar-a-Lago, which is one of the premier properties, I've been there several times, so is Pam, you know, it is really priceless to some extent. It's historically an important place in the United States. It's one of the few places that spans the intercoastal and the ocean on the East Coast. And so, I just look at that being valued at $18 million. I think most Americans would pay $18 million if given that chance to buy that. It's worth so much more.
Well, this is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the entire world. We're looking at a shot of Mar-a-Lago right now. You can pay $18 million, not that most of us could or would, but for like a 3-bedroom house in Palm Beach, you would never in a million years get Mar-a-Lago for $18 million. I don't know what this judge is thinking about. Pam, final thought on this before I let you go.
Yeah, houses in Mar-a-Lago, single-family houses, Martha, are for sale right now for $56 million. One I think just sold for up to $100 million. So it's ridiculous what they're doing. And think how many employees of the Trump properties in New York that they will put out of business. All these people won't have jobs anymore if they continue with what they're doing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I would just encourage everybody to take an unbiased look at this situation. Ask yourself if you think it adds up. It's in the court system now. We'll see what the court system says. There's no jury in this case. As we pointed out, it's a civil case. It's about money. And it's just the first of many that we will be watching as we move through all of these indictments of the former president, which we'll cover here as well. So we'll see where that one goes. Pam, thank you very much. Pam Bondi, Matt Whitaker, great to have you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.